All right, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everybody, depending on where you're joining us from in the world. My name is Daniel Myers, and I'm the Land Tenure and Property Rights Fellow with WCF, and I'll be serving as the session host for today's breakout session on scaling lasting impact and community-driven development. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. It would be fantastic if you could please stay on mute when you are not speaking today. That way we can hear from each of our wonderful panelists and also make sure that no one's getting interrupted. So you can see here to mute yourself, you can simply click on the microphone button next to your name in the participants box, or the mute button in the bottom left-hand corner of your Zoom screen. Number two, if you have questions as they come up throughout the session, we'd love to hear them. You can simply submit your questions in the Zoom chat to the participant entitled Ask Questions Here, which is our colleague Priska Ayema. To access the chat, you can just click on the speech bubble at the bottom of your screen. And finally, this session will be recorded and will be available on demand on wcf.pathable.co, which is the service we're using to host this year's partnership meeting. If you have any technical issues, you can also use wcf.pathable.co, go to account, and get support if you have any technical issues, or feel free to message me as well. Another reminder, it's fantastic to see everybody. We're happy that you're able to join us today. We do ask that you please do keep your camera on. We find it will kind of help with the engagement and to make a virtual meeting feel more like it's face-to-face, so we appreciate that. And with that, I will hand things off to my boss, Yusuf Njoy, who will be serving as moderator for today's session. Yusuf?
Okay, thank you, Daniel. I hope you can hear me. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to our session here. We're gonna have a 1 hour and a half discussion about community-driven development and about how to achieve impact and how to achieve lasting impact and to scale it up. And in this respect, we'll be having the opportunity to benefit the experience of various set of experienced and important speakers. We will have the opportunity to have Mrs. Mariam Dao Gabala, who is the chairperson of the supervisory board of the Solidaridad Network. We'll be having Teria Ajako Kwateng, who is the sustainable sourcing representative West Africa for the Hershey Company. We'll also be having Dr. Felix Adoyobo. He is the Director for Development Policy at the Ghana National Development Planning Commission. And we also have Rizal Al-Gamar. He is the Chief of Business Development working for Save the Children Indonesia. And Daniel Taylor, who is the President of Future Generations University. So as we can see, there are various experiences, there are various geographies ranging from West Africa to Asia and the United States. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion, I hope so. So we'll, before we get in a bit of background with this topic, as you know, 2020, this year makes the world brutally facing a widespreading pandemic, as well as an urgent call for more social justice. So we have seen it in the news, and in this kind of context, being able to generate and sustain impact in cocoa farming communities is more important than ever. And so far, many World Cocoa Foundation members, especially in West Africa, for example, as part of the Cocoa Action Strategy that was started back in 2014, and now the Pathway to Sustainable Cocoa Strategy. These members have adopted and practiced community-driven development in order to empower communities and create a conducive environment for strong local development, women empowerment, and child protection. Community need assessments and community action plans then has been developed through participatory approaches and this was widely adopted by the companies. But at this point, considering the stakeholders that are engaged so far, as well as the potentially interested other parties that can join the partnership, it is really important to figure out the way things have worked to deliver outcomes and achieve or simply trigger change, including in adverse conditions such as the one we are facing with the COVID-19 pandemic. So we needed to have an informed discussion based on implementation experience, sharing, and also talking about innovative thinking that will help address the issue. So the goal of this session is really about questioning the World Cocoa Foundation members' experience of community-driven development so far, to discuss the extent to which we have been able to activate what will bring the lasting impact and then scale it up to amplify this impact. This is actually what we need to do. So to go through this interesting agenda, we'll have our speakers that I have introduced so far, and we'll be starting with one of them. She is a sustainable development consultant and practitioner with over 15 years of experience working passionately with the nonprofit and private sector to advance progress among rural population and smallholder farmers. She has also been involved in the design and the implementation of the Hershey Company's cocoa sustainability strategy in the West Africa region. And she has also been involved in delivering innovative programs in girls and women's education, adult literacy, and health across multiple West African countries. She holds a Master of Public Administration in International Development degree from the Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming Tawa Ajeko Kwateng from the company. Tawa, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. Good afternoon to everyone. I hope you can hear me quite clearly. And very happy to be joining you from Accra, Ghana. Could I have my first slide?
One moment, Tuya, let's see. Can you see it now?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go to the next slide. This has blacking out for a reason, but yes, this slide. Yep, that's good. Thanks a lot. So thanks everyone again. Great to be joining you all. I want to share a little bit about what we've been doing as the Hershey Company in West Africa on community-driven development. So our Cocoa for Good program is really, Cocoa for Good is our cocoa sustainability strategy as a company, which we launched a couple of years ago, but it has been building on the work that we've done with partners in West Africa since 2013. And so you see in this slide a pictorial depiction of our Cocoa for Good strategy. And we have 4 key pillars which really address critical issues of nutrition, youth development, poverty, and the environment, all presented in an integrated and comprehensive strategy. And we have stronger communities as a key element of our vision. Our vision is a world where we see cocoa farmers and their families able to live healthy, prosperous lives that make communities stronger and ecosystems thriving for generations to come. As a leading brand, we see our role in achieving this vision really as a catalyst, also as an innovator, and as a long-term partner for development. So championing community-driven development for sustainability is very important to us. So today I just try to highlight some of the key approaches that we have been using to move the needle on this front, and also some of the key questions that we ask ourselves in the process as we are working towards community-driven development, and to see if we are moving in the right direction. Next slide. Thank you. So for Hershey in West Africa, what we've been doing in terms of our community-driven development model, or the approach that we've been using, we really focus on putting the community in the driver's seat, right? That is the whole at the core of community-driven development. It's about putting the community at the center of decision-making and ensuring that they are leading the implementation of development process at the local level. But as a cocoa company, our process always begins from the cocoa farmer within our supply chain. And these business relationships are a very important element to kickstarting and sustaining community development in cocoa communities. So we begin from the process of profiling cocoa farmers and households, the households that they belong to. This helps us to get a better understanding of the people within the structure within which we work in our supply chain. Once we've done that, we are able to identify more clearly the communities that the cocoa farmers are coming from, the communities that they live in and they work in. And then together with our implementing partners, we begin the process of community entry and engagement. And establishing what we have here as CDCOMs. They are really community development committees, sometimes referred to as in different names in different countries. For the sake of this conversation, we'll just refer to them as CDCOMs. And so we established with the community, pardon me, established with the community the CDCOMs who really help to drive the process of development within the community. Then we use participatory development approaches to conduct needs assessments. And the needs assessments are really helping to identify the key challenges and needs within these communities. So once the data has been collected and analyzed and the profiles of communities have been developed, then we can move to the process of developing, developing community action plans. So the community action plan development is led often by the CDCOMs and facilitated also by the implementing partners that we work with, and try to capture the various priorities in the communities and see how best to address the needs that the communities are facing. These CAPs are then verified, go through a process of verification and activation with the whole community. And then the last 2 points are the ones that I think are most relevant to our discussion as we're moving along. How then do we sustain community action? Once you've developed these community action plans and are working to implement the activities outlined in them, how do you sustain community action? Is it merely by ensuring that there is internal drive from the CDCOMs themselves, or there needs to continue to be an external push from other parties to support the sustenance of these actions? And then also the very important point of leveraging external partnerships for longer term development, which is what we all want to see, which is what we are all aiming for in the communities that we work in. Next slide, please. So within the approaches that we've been working on, I would call like the traditional development approaches to community-driven development are often done in collaboration with NGOs. So we have several NGOs that we work with, both local and international NGOs that we work with in our program. And these entities have significant experience in grassroots development and in building the capacity of the communities. And so we've been able to achieve a lot of success with them in many communities. But we also work with suppliers. These are our traders and exporters within the supply chain. And for the suppliers, their core capacity really is farmer professionalization and cocoa productivity. But we find them now being engaged in this process of community-driven development. So it has meant that there's been a sharp learning curve for many of these partners. There has been the need for them to quickly build their internal capacity in participatory development, in being able to really engage with communities to ensure that the processes to have successful community-driven development are brought about. One of the other things that we've noticed in the process as we've been working on community-driven development in our programs is the quality and consistency of the needs assessments that are done and the community action plans that are being implemented. And this, I think, also comes about somewhat depending on the capacity of the partners that we are working with, but also in terms of the level of engagement of the community members themselves. Key priorities that are addressed in the community action plans are wide and varied, but you often find the reality is one needs to balance the wide needs of the and priorities of the community with the realities of resources available, and also to some extent the priorities in the sustainability plans of companies that are working with the community. Another key point I think is important for us to think about as we look at lasting impact is the length of engagement with communities. In our traditional approaches, we typically have projects that are working 3 years with communities. If you come into the cocoa supply chain, we often tend to have longer business relationships with farmers and therefore the communities that they work in. So how do we begin to look at leveraging these kind of relationships for a longer lasting development approaches with the communities? Next slide, please. So it makes us begin to think about or consider some of the other partners that are within the cocoa supply chain that we work in and how we can leverage their capacity to also work towards a lasting impact. And I would want to highlight the role of farmer cooperatives or farmer groups, as they are called in some places. And what we think is holds a lot of potential for generating and sustaining lasting impact for community-driven development. Cooperatives, by definition, are another representation of a community. Cooperatives are a group of people who are united together to meet common economic and social aspirations. So if we look at them as a significant part of the broader community within which cocoa is located, then one could see how they could play a significant role in ensuring lasting impact of our community-driven development efforts in cocoa communities. But it also means that we really have to look at how do we build the internal capacity of the farmer cooperatives to be able to engage more effectively on community-driven development. And also how do we develop their external partnerships? They have partnerships with companies such as ours and other bodies. How do we build their capacity to develop these external relationships for improved community-driven development efforts in communities? We already see the farmer groups doing a lot at the community level. I've tried to highlight some things on the slide. Let me go to my last slide now, noting time also, that the other area that we've seen of key importance is leveraging partnerships. When we talk about lasting impact, there's no doubt that communities cannot do it on their own. There are challenges to scaling up efforts. There are challenges to resource mobilization. How do we begin to look at leveraging significant partnerships that help communities drive towards long-term development? One of the key areas is engaging local government, which we see is very effective, where local government do have funds available and have longer term support mechanisms in place for communities. How could that be effectively leveraged upon to help communities to advance in the work that they are doing? But we also look at new spaces of development. As a company, Hershey is very interested in looking at innovation and looking at new partnerships, new spaces for mobilizing resources and funds. I'll highlight a couple of things that we've been doing. One of them is innovative partnerships with government, NGOs, schools and PTAs and USAID. So in Ghana and now in Cote d'Ivoire, we have a partnership on nutrition, which has really helped to scale up efforts to get fortified nutrition to school children, allowing them to stay in school, allowing us to see in reduced anemia and also improved academic performance. This is a partnership that really has enabled us to achieve much more scale in what we are doing at the community level. Another area I think is really important that I would like to highlight is looking towards business-driven solutions and working with social enterprises to be able to stimulate local development. We've begun to do that a lot also in West Africa, working with various social enterprises such as PEG for solar products, Farmer Line for farmer information, Meridia for land documentation. And by crowding in social enterprises who can work effectively at the community level with the communities themselves, you begin to see greater opportunities for achieving lasting impact. So from the Hershey Company, these are a few of the things that we've been working on, looking at both the traditional approaches to community-driven development, but also beginning to explore new areas that we feel can really help to deepen the dialogue with communities and also leverage partnerships for creating lasting impact. Thank you so much. I look forward to continued discussions.
Thank you, Teiva. Thank you. From a West African perspective, what has made it successful, or what was the challenges that you faced in carefully analyzing, building the capacities at the community level with the local partners, and also ensure that before going further, we identify and leverage relevant partnership to make the process sustainable. That was the West African perspective. And we also have the opportunity to have the Southeast Asian perspective. And in this respect, we are gonna host another speaker. He is someone with more than 25 years of experience with leading private and nonprofit sector in international business development, sustainable development, environment and conservation, managing and developing diverse team, impact investing, and entrepreneurship capacity building for micro and small businesses. He has also designed and developed and implemented successful integrated CSR, corporate social responsibility, and CSV, creating shared value programs that enhances value for customers and employees in health and wellness, entrepreneurial capacity building and training with the goals to improve customers' businesses, livelihood, and health. He is passionate in social development, economic and ecological impact at scale through the creation of shared value, social responsibility and sustainability, balanced with pragmatic business perspective and organizational excellence. It is very late on his hand, 8 hours ahead of our West Africa time. Let us say a big thank you and welcome to Rizal Algama from Save the Children Indonesia. Rizal, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Yusuf. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So let me just give you a brief introduction about Save the Children. Save the Children is a leading global organization on child protection. We believe that in order to achieve its ambition for children to survive, learn, and to be protected, it needs to build a child-sensitive families and communities. Communities, as the smallest unit of social group, determines its members' views, values, habits, interactions, relations, and practices. Therefore, Save the Children consistently invests in community-based programming. Next slide, please. Our approach is integrated community-centered design, which really relies on the power of the people in the communities. It is based on the assumption that the solutions to today's most challenging issues, including child labor, came from the power of communities and from unleashing the power of the people, and not from what we traditionally call experts. It's about designing the community versus designing for them. It focuses on organizations, facilitations, and relationship, and creates shared value among the community members by following the steps: listen, connect, and move. Essentially, there are key success.
Dat is brood. Charlie Wies.
Essentially, the key success factors in implementing an integrated community work is really about disclosure, which is forge trusting relationship by disclosing issues, and then define, we discuss thematic issues that impact to their livelihood of the communities, and then discover what are the assets. We map them out together with the family, and then we embark on a dreaming session. You know, what is it that the communities wants to achieve together in order to improve their livelihood? And then come the co-creation, co-design process that we work together with the communities. So as the process is highly participatory and reflective, the ICCD doesn't end. It's a cycle of planning and implementing and evaluating, and another round of the same cycle again and again. So in conducting ICCD, Save the Children equip communities with its common approaches as tools for addressing the key issues confronting the communities. This common approaches such as parenting without violence, steps to protect, household economy analysis, among many, are approaches to thematic issues that we have tested in various contexts and in selected communities and has proven to work. So by doing so, the ICCD process is both participatory and also empowering, because communities, when are equipped with the proven tools to develop innovation and solutions within themselves, that eventually enable them up to scale up the impacts. Yeah. So we hope that by implementing this integrated process, yeah, we can have a thriving communities over time. Yeah. Next slide, please. Indonesia's community-driven development program has been under implementation for more than 15 years. When it began in 1997, right after the Asian financial crisis, if you all remember. It was funded by the World Bank Group. Its aim was poverty reduction through community empowerment. Broadly, the program works through the provision of block grants to residents of local communities, who then are responsible for managing these funds. And in 2014, it has transformed from a community-driven development as a program to a community-driven development as a legal institution through the birth of a nationwide community empowerment program governed by the Village National Law, where the CDD principles were integrated into the nationwide policy. So if you see in the slides, point 1 to 6, these are regulations and policies that has been created by the Indonesian government from the national level up to subnational and then up to the district level. So in essence, all the regulatory framework is there already, but it's about the execution at the subnational level. That's where our role is to really help those governments at subnational and then at the district on how we can join all this enabling condition to make sure that we have a robust cocoa community within Indonesia. This initiative fits perfectly with our works for community-centered programming in child protection, including in the cocoa communities, and facilitating community-driven impact for child protection in the cocoa growing communities in Indonesia. We neither fly on our own nor working in an exclusive ecosystem. In fact, we collaborate and join the existing enabling condition and systems in Indonesia that could provide resources and sustainability to the community development initiative. So Indonesia, in essence, has done quite relatively well and quite comprehensive in addressing child issues and integrating it into the current system from the national, subnational to the local levels. So in each and every programs that we embark with communities, we need to understand what are our point of departure, and then what are the point of arrival that we want to achieve together with the communities. Yeah. This is what I meant previously by disclosure and define. Yeah. And then we work together with all the community members to understand what are the gaps, what are the priorities that we want to address. Yeah. So this is all what we do is facilitation. Yeah. All the ideas, the ownership that's coming from the communities. Yeah. So this is where I think successful community-driven initiative is built. It has to come from the community itself. Yeah. Next slide, please. So what are the best practices and what's working, what's not? I will be telling all of you here. So we have 3 essential key programs in all our community driven initiatives. Yeah. Number 1 is the community action plans, where the communities themselves decide on their own development priorities and then plan, implement, and manage the projects that fulfill these priorities. The program also provides technical assistance through facilitation who guide and train communities. This approach promotes community self-management and emphasizes cooperation, participation, transparency, accountability, and capacity building. The community action plans in cocoa farming communities went through, essentially there are 6 stages, yeah, on identifying what they would like to achieve, how they will achieve it, who will be responsible for each of the activities for the results, what resources they will need, and how those resources will be obtained by them, and when and where will they be implemented throughout these activities. And the most critical part is that how will this be monitored and the progress is reported to the broader communities within the villages area. In the second program is the community-based child protection, which has become a community-driven development model for replication at the village level. The CBPC have been adapted to fit different locations and have been successful in establishing the prevention as well as risk management or mitigation and response mechanism within the community. And we have built capacities of the CBPCs to raise awareness to encourage community members to report cases of child labor and violence against children, handling cases based on their available resources or referring cases to service providers. CBCP works effectively because it has legal basis from the village decree. Yeah. It has to have that legal basis and a formal endorsement from the district authorities. Yeah. So it will help the villages to secure funding from the annual village funding that goes through the subnational, the district, and then the village, that explicitly regulates that it could be used for child protection initiative in the villages. Last but not least is the village saving and loan program, which currently there are 785 VSLA operational with over 25,000 community members participated. And over the last almost 3 years, the VSLA program has achieved assets under management of over $100,000, yeah, which making the cocoa farming a prosperous business involves improving the cocoa farming community's ability to be resilient and cope with volatility. The Village Saving and Loan Association approach allows communities to manage their incomes by saving and allocate their income for productive purposes and investment in their children and families. Yeah. And through this method, the program reaches people who do not have access to basic financial services, including the very poor and remote areas, communities that could not meet the criteria, even for microfinancing institutions. Yeah. So let me just summarize what's working. The CBCP as a legal village platform become an entry point for us for community engagement in the village level for health, education, livelihood, water, and other issues. It's a legal entity status that ensures the stability and enables the scaling up by accessing funding and multi-stakeholder partnership within the landscape. And then the adoption of the participatory planning process and its integration to local government formal planning mechanism. And third is linkages to existing sub-district, inter-villages, and district system and supports. Yeah. What we learn, our lessons learned, and what hasn't worked for us when we started to work is that community mostly rely heavily on certain key community members or figures or the elderly, which overlap the roles or functions. So progress and growth are not always as fast and as expected. And I think the second most important thing in this community-driven initiative is that communities and partners, most of them, when we started, they are aiming for quick fixes, yeah, which hinders the development of systemic change that we all want to achieve in the villages. Yeah. So thank you. I hope I'm not over time and happy to answer questions later on. Over to you, Yusuf. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rizal. That was very informative because what I thought was very important is to understand that really that the solution comes from the power of the community itself and not from the expert. This is a very powerful sentence for our work. And I was also very impressed by the exercise about identifying the assets and then nurturing the dream that will inform the co-creation process and then equipping people with the proper skills to continue the work. But what I thought was one of the most important thing is maybe on the formal side and on the legal side, because the environment that allowed you to scale up based on the institutionalization of all these practices that are, so to speak, simply development practices elsewhere, most of the time implemented by NGO, seeing them taken over by a government, giving legal basis to community bodies to stabilize the system and build an ecosystem that will be more conducive. This is something really important to mention. And of course, there are always lessons to learn about how to ensure that the power is not concentrated in a handful of key community members or having people more focusing on longer term and systemic change. So that was a very interesting journey in the Indonesian context. Now I'm proposing you to come back to West Africa for another journey that will be virtual, and I will take you in Côte d'Ivoire and in the center of the country, in the southern part of the center of the country, near Tabo, and walk you through the experience of a community development committee that was set up by an NGO in partnership with a cocoa company. So Daniel, if we can run the video of Tomidabo, that would be great.
Je m'appelle Kwasi Kwame Emmanuel. Je suis marié. J'ai 5 enfants. J'ai 42 ans. Mes enfants vont tous à l'école à Tabo. Je suis planteur de cacao de 5 hectares. Quand je récolte mon cacao, je le vends à la coopérative ETC. Ici à Tondabo, avant, en tout cas c'était difficile. On rassemble les gens pour former des groupements. Mais les gens bouffent l'argent. On ne se retrouvait pas. Ça se gâte. On ne gagne même pas l'eau pour boire à Tondabo. On ne sait pas comment il faut se mobiliser pour avoir une cotisation pour pouvoir créer une pompe. Mais quand est venu installer le CDCOM a commencé à travailler pour le village. Quand les ETC sont venus, ils nous ont formés. Franchement, il faut le dire, ces formations-là, ils nous ont formés. Mais il y a eu beaucoup de formations qu'ils nous ont données.
C'est mon chéri qui est là. Je suis avec Danoisé. Je suis la présidente Danoisé. Je suis dans cette école. J'ai suivi une formation des gens avant au campement ici. Là. Les garçons ne nous écoutent pas. Si tu veux travailler là, eux ne te capturent pas. Mais quand on a suivi formation des gens là, avant même si on quitte au champ pour venir, si ils sont en train de travailler là, si je dis chérie viens m'aider là, il me dit non, moi je ne suis pas femme pour venir t'aider. Mais maintenant là, des fois même quand ils sont en train de piler là, c'est lui qui prépare ça.
En plus des gens, on a été formé sur la bonne gouvernance. Comment mobiliser les fonds du village et comment aussi régler les problèmes de palabres dans le village. Et aussi, comment suivre les travaux de construction aussi.
Il ne faut pas oublier, on a suivi les droits des enfants. En tout cas, on a été formés.
On essaie de mobiliser les femmes. Ce qui fait qu'aujourd'hui, des femmes, elles-mêmes, ils s'associent. Ils créent des choses importantes dans le village ici. Avant, les enfants partaient à l'école. Ils n'avaient pas d'extrait. On les chassait. Mais quand est venu installer CDCOM, ce qui a fait qu'on a eu la possibilité d'avoir des jugements pour des enfants aujourd'hui. Tout a commencé à changer à Tondabo.
Thank you. I hope it runs smoothly on your side. It was just a quick journey to try to figure out from a community member's perspective all the things Rizal were explaining so far, and including the way a community can cope with the COVID-19 pandemics, as we could see at the end of the video, setting up and using TP taps that will provide simple access to water for hand washing to prevent the spreading of the pandemic. So that could also be a source of questions for the audience. So you are more than welcome if you have questions raised by this video, and we will direct them to one of our speakers. Our next speaker is a very important personality, I think, in our context here. She is a citizen of Cote d'Ivoire. She is an economist. She is a development banker. She's board member of various firms and banks. And she is member of the Senate here in Cote d'Ivoire. She has been for 20 years the regional director for West Africa of Waco Credit. It is a finance development bank where she successfully faced the challenge of supporting growth and microfinance of industry, socially responsible small and medium enterprises, cooperatives in rural areas, and women's association. Through the Solidaridad Network, she is bridging the public and private sectors, so another bridge builder on our panel, and other stakeholders for change in a more viable agriculture. And She has been playing a very important role and contribution for sustainable development, youth entrepreneurship, financial inclusion of the poorest, especially women. And last but not the least, she is the president of the Coalition of Female Leaders here in Côte d'Ivoire. Ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming Madame Mariam Daou Gabala. You have the floor, please, Madame Gabala.
Thank you, Yusuf. First of all, thank you again for the invitation. And I really feel honored to participate to this breakout session and share with you the experience of my organization and look at CDD again after the film we've seen on a producer perspective. For Solidaridad, community-driven development aim to more community engagement in the work they do for the interests of all stakeholders, the producer within his local community, of course, the cocoa industry, and the states. In my presentation, I will focus on the outcome expected from a producer and its community. From Solidaridad point of view, community-driven development is key for an inclusive and holistic growth of the community we work in. And therefore, community engagement is vital to ensure community ownership that facilitate the necessary changes and sustainable impact. We believe and experiment that citizens accept and own development intervention when they can see immediate benefits in their life. This is why we also have developed a community development strategy based on 3 pillars. Of course, community entry, community engagement, and particularly an inclusive socio-economic empowerment program. Through this community development strategy, we seek to build robust and striving communities in which members are active participants in decision-making around governance, economic and social ecosystem that build resilience for its member and into the future. What type of outcome are expected from a community-driven development approach, including from a resilience perspective? Next slide, please. I would like us, next slide. I would like us to have a look beyond infrastructure. No, come back, please. Not this one, the one before, the lady. You went too quickly. Yes, please. Let us look at this lady and let us look beyond infrastructure, beyond numbers, beyond program, because it's all about people. And let us ask ourselves, what does it mean for these women, small cocoa producer in Côte d'Ivoire? What does it mean she's empowered and resilient? And what is she aspiring to? Next slide, please. The first and direct, tangible outcome of community-driven development strategy is, first of all, economic welfare of this lady, meaning that she has developed a minimum of financial independence. She has developed entrepreneurial skills, savings, and she can leverage on her saving to access different forms of credit. She managed her farm as a business, and she is able to comply with coming up new regulation. I mean the European regulation on due diligence. Next slide, please. The second outcome is social, meaning that as member of the community, She works within the community to build supportive networks that reinforce social cohesion and combat activities that threaten the social fabric. She has access to literacy, like in this picture. She is aware and combats child labor, and she works to prevent environment deterioration. To summarize, she has the skill to embark on self-development agenda. Next slide, please. The third outcome is governance. Our woman cocoa farmer is able to engage in a local inclusive governance and decision-making. The empowered community she is part of engage different power blocks within the environment, like political, social, or traditional, and negotiate development of infrastructure within governance structure that secure their well-being. Education, water supply, road, healthcare, etc. Next slide, please. Finally, the ultimate outcome of a community-driven development are empowered community and empowered members, all together engage in inclusive local governance and social economic ecosystem to promote their well-being and those of generation after them. Next slide, please. If empowered farmers and empowered communities are able to determine their development needs, prioritize, negotiate, and mobilize resources to meet these needs, they became more resilient. And yes, the future of generation to come becomes brighter. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking us in this journey through the eyes of a female cocoa farmer to really identify the key outcomes that we should be seeking as part of our community-driven development. It's about empowerment. It is about resilience. It's about being able to fulfill aspiration. And it's about building the social infrastructure that will allow people to be responsible of their own destiny because they will be empowered enough to engage in balanced partnership and determine, prioritize, negotiate, and then reflect the type of resilient communities that we want to reach. This is what I got from what I've just heard through the eyes of this female cocoa farmer, and I'm very grateful for having heard this from you. We are pursuing our journey now. We are crossing the Atlantic Ocean again, another ocean to be crossed, that time to go back to school at the university with our next speaker. He has been engaged in social change and conservation for 4 decades now. And is actually one of the synthesizers of what is known as the seed scale method, which is an understanding of social change initiated by UNICEF task force, a task force that he co-chaired back in 1992 to 1995. And from that work, a couple of books were published by himself. The first one was Just and Lasting Change, How Communities Can Own Their Futures at the Johns Hopkins University Press in 2016. And the second one was Empowerment from Seeds of Human Energy to a Scale of Global Change. That one was published at Oxford University Press back in 2011. Many other books followed these ones. But he was also, and this is interesting, in this world of sustainable development, he was the initiator of 5 new national parks in China, Nepal, and India. And over the last 40 years, he founded 12 nonprofit organizations in 8 countries. we are welcoming now a man who received his master's and doctoral degrees from Harvard University. Let us welcome Daniel Taylor, professor at Future Generations University and also president of this university. Daniel, you have the floor to let us know how we can think maybe differently in the way we design and conduct community-driven development.
Yusuf, thank you so very much. And my congratulations to all the speakers who went before me, because I learned a great amount about what is being done. And it's so inspirational to have learned from you all about this diversity in your programs with cocoa production and in working with communities. And what I want to share with you right now is an approach that, as Yusuf said, came from UNICEF, because UNICEF wanted to know what the scholarship was of community development. They were doing a lot, but what is best practices and effective practices? So the seed scale method came from that. And the key point here that I want to emphasize is that it requires a very complicated system to be made very simple. And so let's start, next slide, please. The simple idea is that every community has seeds, and they're seeds of human energy. And the challenge now is to have those seeds grow in the local context, using the government systems that are there and using the business resources that are there, so that two things happen in scaling up. One, benefits reach more people, and secondly, the quality of life improves. And that's a feedback loop. As the quality of life improves, more people are being drawn into the process. So the next slide, please. So what you see when you use the seed scale method, and there's a great deal of evidence that I can't present right now, shows that we can create double the impact in half the time for 1/5 the cost when compared to traditional community development. Because now we have partnerships doing all the work, not professionals. Now we're growing from successes that are already happening, those seeds that I mentioned, they're there already in the community. We're growing that. And the growth process is an evolutionary, iterative process. It goes and goes. So we're moving towards sustainability. And the beginning point, very importantly, came from inside the community. This was not something that was done to the community from the outside, or that came because of money from the outside. The resources were there. So what is happening in this process is a mentoring and a learning process. Fundamentally, behaviors are being changed because there's local evidence. Next slide, please. So there are 4 principles that drive this. The first principle is building from success. You're starting with what's working, not with what's broken. You're going to make what's working work better. The next slide, please. Next. So the objective is to grow from the bottom up, to help the community. And how we do that, next slide, is we use the top-down enabling environment that's there. Whatever the government, corrupt or effective, whatever the institutions are, you use what is there. It's like you have to use the weather wherever you live. You can't change the weather. So you use that top-down environment. Next, please. And so our opportunity is to bring from the outside in some mentorship and some learning to create a forward-going momentum. This is the 3-way partnership, and it has to be specific to every institution. Next slide. So that is driven now by evidence. So we have a system of evidence gathering that creates decisions that are made not in the usual way by who has the power or who has the money or who has the strongest opinions, but we have a system that quickly very quickly gathers local evidence and facts, so decisions are fitting each locale. The next slide, please. So ultimately, what is changing is behaviors. Behaviors mean that they can be accessed by everybody. Next slide, please. And so there's a system of 7 tasks. And please run through these, Daniel. These tasks are like an education, just click away. These tasks are like the process by which you grow cocoa. You create a committee, you identify past successes, you study successes elsewhere, you gather local evidence. This is a cycle, like planting a field that goes around and around, and it grows in your place, sustainable development. Next slide, please. So when you apply the 4 principles to the 7 tasks, this is how, using this complicated system, you can get double the impact in half the time for 1/5 the cost. You create sustainable progress. So final slide, please, Daniel. Oh, the next slide, never mind, go back. So finally, the point, that last point I'm trying to make is that we have a whole set of resources with our university. If you want to access them, they're at seed-scale.org. Okay, seed-scale.org. There's a website, and from that website, if you want to learn more, they're there at the bottom of the screen now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel. You respected the contract that we had time-wise, which is great. So it's important to figure out that new things as most of the time simple things, and simply imagine a seed that will use what is available in its own environment to grow, and using the best of all of the available resources, and not forcefully searching for the best from the outside and emphasizing on what I've not learned, unless it is about learning the positive lessons from that. And it's a totally new process. We'll see later on how it can be fed into our current CDD practices. But before we get there at the interactive part of our session, we have a last speaker to listen to get the governmental perspective. And he has over 20 years of progressive technical and management experience in development planning, environmental engineering, and management. He also provides a result-oriented leadership in the preparation of national development policy framework and strategies in his country, Ghana. He's also the coordinator for Ghana's sustainable development goals implementation coordinating committees. And he holds a Master of Science and a PhD degrees in water and environmental management from the Loughborough University, United Kingdom, having previously obtained a Bachelor in Science and Civil Engineering from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. And last but not the least, he is the member of both the Ghana Institution of Engineers and the Ghana Institute of Planners. So, since it is about to talk about the bridge between all that we have discussed and the government development planning system, let us welcome Dr. Felix Adoyobo. Dr. Adoyobo, you have the floor. And there will be no slide supporting. He will be talking and will be listening. Thank you, Daniel. Is Dr. Adoyobo still there? Please unmute yourself. And the floor is yours. You can turn on your camera, please. And please, everyone, do not forget, you can ask your questions in the chat box, and ask your question here, will direct them to us, and the moderator will have the opportunity to answer. Dr. Adeyobo, are you there? Can you hear me? Okay, seems that there is an issue on his hand. Maybe we'll be having him through a question that will be coming from the audience of some of the questions that the other presentations has prompted on my side. So saying this, I'm inviting you now to enter the interactive part of our session. So this is where I expect to have questions from yourself or from myself, or based on what I've heard from our speakers. But I will also have the opportunity to engage you in some interactive exercises of pollings that we'll be able to access in a couple of minutes. But before getting to this, I have some questions for some of our speakers. Starting with the first of them, I mean, Teiwa, we started the presentations. So Teiwa, from a company perspective, how do you think that the way companies measure community impact have changed over the years, based on your experience and on what you have heard from the other speakers?
Okay, thanks very much for the question, Yusuf. I think that initially companies were really focused on the individual farmer and impact on the farmer's productivity, more farm-based impact. And over the past few years that we focused more on communities and community-driven development, we have begun to look more closely at impact that we see at the community level, particularly in terms of some of the key things that have come up in the conversation today: impact on education, on children's protection, on women's empowerment. In terms of looking at how we measure that impact, I think that has led us also now to begin to think more deeply and delve more deeply into our impact measurements. A lot of our work now is moving beyond just the outputs and things like measuring the number of people who have gone through trainings that we have engaged in at the community level, or the number of, for example, infrastructure in terms of things like water pumps built or schools constructed or classrooms renovated, and delving deeper into more at the outcome and impact level. Are women able to take up more leadership positions in the communities and have a greater voice in the discussions, like we saw in that video that was shared from Côte d'Ivoire? We're also looking more into how are we seeing the community, the committees actually beginning to take more initiative, if I can put it that way, in driving the development. So it's not just having external parties coming in to direct what's being done, but communities themselves being able to identify and push for what they see as the needs that they have, what kind of changes are occurring at that level. And then also in terms of some of the broader aspects around income, all the things that we are doing at the community level are trying to tackle root causes of poverty, for example, and so are we beginning to see impact in terms of increase in incomes of farmers, their households, and then beginning therefore to see upliftment of the community at large. I think these are all some of the things that we have shifted from just the direct, as I mentioned earlier, direct farmer impact and farm impact into more of the things we see at the community level. It has also required us to, frankly, build our own capacity and partner with others to be able to understand better how do we measure these impacts in the space of particularly some of the qualitative things, which are not so easy to measure directly. Yeah.
Okay. So it took us as company members, WCF members, it took us all this time to realize that actually farmers live in the community and not in the farms.
Well, yes, I mean, I think it's also the point of understanding more clearly the impact of community, the impact of the whole on the individual, and how the farmer as an individual can actually thrive better when their community as a whole is doing better. And so that has really helped us to direct our thought process and our understanding of the importance of community in the sustainability work that we do. Yeah.
Great, then. So I'm turning to Dr. Adeyobo again with a precise question. How can we leverage the governmental development planning system in all this community-driven development process, and why is it so important, and how can you help in this process to ensure the sustainability of the action that the companies are trying to do with the implementing partners?
Right, thank you very much, Yusuf, and apologies for the challenge I had a few minutes ago. Right, I think I was speaking from the Ghanaian perspective on and what we do at the National Development Planning Commission. And first of all, we do acknowledge that the development needs across the country vary widely, vary, and then also from community to community, there are different needs. And also do acknowledge that in as much as government is the lead actor in development, government is not the only actor, and other stakeholders and interested parties in seeing to the proper development of our communities, and then for that matter, the nation as a whole. Two things I want to talk about in relation to your questions. That community approach is very important because we promote the bottom-up approach. First of all, needs assessment, needs identification, and need prioritization is key. But beyond that, sequencing and phasing of how to address the needs, it's probably, in my opinion, more important. So it is not always the case of doing the most important things first, but rather doing the things that would provide a strong foundation to build up upon various activities. So for a classic example, I tend to say the important thing for one may be to build his mansion with a living quarters and etc. But in terms of phasing and sequencing, you may want to build a living quarters first, go in there, and then from there take your time, mobilize resources, and build up your dream house. So that they tend to be the emphasis on identifying needs, prioritizing them, and straight away going for the topmost priority, where there may not be the preconditions or good enough foundation to build on and then provide a sustainable solution to the problem at hand. And secondly, um, government systems tend to be bureaucratic and then also tend to be fairly stable as opposed to civil society initiatives that could be maybe 3 years, 4 years, maximum 10 years if you are lucky, and then private sector initiatives. And therefore, it's important to leverage on the skills and expertise from the private sector, from the civil society, vis-a-vis what is available in the government sector for cross-fertilization of ideas, building synergies, and then making the most efficient use of the resources available in addressing the several needs in the community. And here I'm talking about money, I'm talking about the human resource. I'm talking about the logistics necessary to bring about development in our communities, and also for effective leveraging of various community-driven and community-led initiatives into government system. And probably let me touch on the scaling up bit. Previous speakers have um, spoken brilliantly about scaling up. And what I want to mention in the context of scaling up is the the various initiatives that needs to promote learning. There are a lot of great initiatives going on around the country, various communities, but then many often there's not enough mechanism to promote learning, i.e., how well do we document the practices, the lessons, and then how well do we disseminate this information to the relevant stakeholders, not just, for instance, if it's a civil society-led initiative, not only among civil society partners, but even among private stakeholders, the businesses, among government officials, because the civil society organization cannot be in all places at the same time to bring about the scaling up we're talking about, but others can take the lessons learned, um, adapt it to suit their own capabilities and replicate it elsewhere within that context. And that would accelerate the scaling up that we so much need across communities, across sectors, to bring about the effective development and sustain the developmental efforts that we are putting in. And then last but not the least, to re-echo something that Teria said earlier on, um, promoting social enterprises. It's one key way of creating demand for development, and then bringing in the supply side as well to meet the demand in a way that becomes a win-win situation for communities, but then also for the service providers. The era of uh, getting freebies from various actors in terms of development, I think would very soon be over. So we need to look at other ways of bringing about development, not because one has a deep pocket and is very generous and wants to throw out money at communities, but in a way that meets the needs of communities, meets the aspirations and needs of the service providers as well, so that in that way there would always be the motivation, there would always be the desire, there would always be um, resources available to upscale these initiatives, to replicate them in other places, as opposed to having a single initiative in a community, tapping ourselves at the back that we've done very well, and then we move on, and then a few years down the line, the whole system collapses because there was not enough mechanism to sustain it. The whole life cycle um, system has not been thought through or have not been considered, and so maintaining and operating and even expanding the services provided, bearing in mind that communities do grow. And so whatever service is put in today would need to be expanded to meet the growing needs of communities. And last but not the least, there are also the social effects and the demographic effects, where when what we've seen in Ghana is that when there are good initiatives in one community, other communities either tend to migrate into these communities, want to desire, demand for similar services in their communities. And in as much as sometimes it creates healthy competition, if it's not managed well, the competition could become unhealthy as well. So in a nutshell, I'll conclude by saying that development is everyone's business, not only government. It's important that we create a win-win situation. The needs are
Is it Dr. Adoyeko or Daniel? Can you hear me? Or is it me?
Yes, I can
development
hear
needs
you,
are
Yusuf.
almost sources efficiently.
Okay, it's okay.
And then by so doing, we need to leverage on the synergies based on our relative strengths, focus more on the things we have in common, which is bringing about development, improving well-being of communities and human life, and not so much on our differences in terms of the approaches and then the perspectives and how we want things done. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's important to work with the government because there are a lot of needs to be met and not only one partner could do this. So it's important to pool resources and optimize them and share the learnings also. This is one important way of working with the government so that there are greater power of replications of the well-working practices. And it's also from the beginning really important to start with what would build the foundations before even thinking to the other thing that may seem to be prioritary. This is what I can summarize from the journey in the NDPC presentation then, and maybe we'll have questions to understand it further. So now some of our participant has questions for the speakers. So it starts with Daniel Taylor. There's a need to know if you know some examples of successful seed scale projects within the cocoa supply chain. And I will even complement this question by saying that to really point at what we think is important as member of the cocoa supply chain, what can practitioners of CDD in the cocoa supply chain learn from focusing on what is already working in communities while conducting our so far PRA-based community need assessment? So if there is no concrete examples in the cocoa supply chain, exactly the question will be, as professional of CDD in the cocoa supply chain, what exactly can we take and to adapt in our current PRA-based community need assessment that is the backbone of our community-driven development? So that's the question for Daniel Taylor.
One of the lovely things about being a professor is when you get a question that's easy to answer. And we do have actually a professor on our staff who has a considerable experience in the cocoa supply chain. And he's working in Bolivia, in the Madidi, on the edges of Madidi National Park. His name is Professor Daniel Robison. He's been on our faculty for a number of years. He's an agronomist. And so I won't try to summarize his experience. We also have a graduate who from our master's degree, who's been working for about 10 years in the cocoa supply chain situation in Nicaragua. Due to the political situation in that country, she's recently had to leave Nicaragua and is working in the United States. But we do have one an alumna from our program and secondly a professor. But in the mindful of the minutes to go, perhaps the best thing is for somebody to send me an email directly to my email, dtaylor@future.edu, and I can give you more examples rather than taking too much time here.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Thank you for being mindful of the time. Priska, please, if you can report back the email in the chat box so that it's accessible to everyone, that would be great. Another question from our audience also is for Tegua. Actually, two questions. As part of your VSLE experience, do you promote income generating activities? And are you interested in working with a company that will provide crop packages, etc.? For that one, I will encourage you to share your email in the chat box. But The other question is about how do you reconcile the top-down approach, more traditional for corporate management practices, and bottom-up approach that enables to get really engaged with local communities and draw on local evidence. That's the very question that you can try to answer now, whilst the other one is more a networking one that can be dealt with further later on through providing your email so that the interested person can contact you. So you have the floor.
All right, thanks, Yusuf. I think that question of the bottom up and top down is an interesting one, but it's one that has been in development for many years. I mean, the development circle and discussions for many, many years. And I think in my experience, the conclusion is that you have to work at both ends to be able to ensure that you really achieve the kind of development that you're looking for. We need to have strong, equipped communities who understand how to articulate their needs and how to express the challenges that they have, and how to and have the capacity to engage with the external bodies that can help and support them to address their needs. But to some extent, you also have to have from the other end, whether it is government or companies, that is in the business sector, in the cocoa sector, for example, the various companies, civil society, who are coming at things from the bigger picture perspective and the policy perspective, to be able to meet the community at a point. I think it's very important. It's neither one nor the other. It has to be both working together to ensure that you are able to achieve the development that you really need to achieve at the community level. So I think, I mean, I could go on into more detail, but looking at time, just to quickly say that you have to work at the two, and both sides have to be very cognizant of the other side and understand the other side very, very well. And so this is where I think it's improving over time, where you have those of us who are more from the top-down approach, I guess, are understanding better communities and who they are truly as communities and what capacity that they have, because they have tremendous capacity to achieve. We can't be doing the hand-me-down kind of things anymore in development. We have to really appreciate who communities are and what they can achieve themselves. And then the communities can't do it alone, though. They need the external resources that are coming from outside. And so it has to be hand in hand and win-win, as Felix was saying earlier.
Thank you, Tewa. Now we're gonna have a bit of fun by taking you through some polling exercise that we have prepared, and that will keep us reflecting on all the things that we have heard from our speakers, using the eyes of a female cocoa farmer, or traveling us to the Indonesian experience of community-driven development. So Priska, if you can share the link of the first polling question. It is about the impact and the change that we want to achieve. So the question is as follows. If you click on the link, you will see it, and you have to select one of the available answer. If we define the seeked impact or the seeked change as the ability to sustain the local development dynamics, how will you rate the achievements of change so far in the WCF-supported community-driven development, both from your experience and from what we have heard from our speakers here? You have 3 possible answers. 1, not yet started. 2, this is something underway, you think. And 3rd, this is something you think has been achieved. So it's up to you. Do click on the link, access the poll, cast your vote, and then we'll share and discuss the results, okay? Daniel, is this Priska monitoring the participation rate of the vote?
I think Priska's on it.
Okay, yeah, so Priska, so let us know when it's done through Teams so that, yeah. You can also share your videos. We want to take some print screen for as our sessions pictures. And I'd like to see you voting also, see how serious you can be in this exercise. Like my friend, Dr. Felix Adoyobo, he looks so serious in the exercise in front of his computer. Great. Okay. Good to see you all. Priska, is it okay?
Not yet. Just received 8 out of 24.
Oh, yes, there are more than 25 persons here. So we need to reach a decent participation rate in this election. I've never said that sentence. Any issue accessing the link, please? Does the link work for everyone? Great. Priska, what's the status?
$12. Just to receive.
Hey, we need to get up to 20 at least.
We are 50. Then
Okay, it's coming. And there are too many polling coming, so that's only the first one. And that's the easiest. So be prepared. No, I'm joking. The other ones are also easy to do. So, yeah, but we really want to get your thinking on this and figure out your experience in participating in that session. Thank you. Okay, Priska, what the status now?
17.
17. Okay, let us see how it looks. It's at least more than the half of the participants. We should respect the right to not vote also. Great. So 19 persons have participated out of 26 or something like that. And the majority of the persons thinks that the change is underway. Can someone tell us why he thinks the change is underway? If no one is volunteering, I will designate a volunteer. Can someone share his thinking on that, please? One of our participants, please. Oh. Can I call upon someone in particular? Okay, let me try randomly. Where is the participant list? The thing is that it may be someone that has not voted. It's underway, but let us try. Kingun Kamara Sauveur, can you please tell us what you voted and why, just for the sake of knowing? Please unmute yourself and share your thought with us quickly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Yusuf. I'm Kingun Kamara Sauveur. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm Kingun Kamara Sauveur, Coco Program Manager for Solidaridad. For this question, I'm questioned underway because I think that a lot of things have been down in the ground, but there's still more thing to do also because community need to be more involved and more what can I say, more empowered for the capacity of driving the project, the development project, the growing on the community. Because what we see today is that the community development project come from we. When I say we cocoa manufacturer, we cocoa industry, we NGO, but the development not come from community, from the ground of community. This is my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And now our last polling. Priska, please pass the link in the chat box. The question is, and here you have up to 3 choices. We need you to do your top 3 pick. What are your top 3 key success factors to achieve lasting impact? And you have the choice among 5 options. First, duration of the initial support to a community, 3 to 5 years, I don't know. Second, contents of the capacity building package for the Community Development Committee. You see there was a lot of emphasis on this in the video from Côte d'Ivoire. Third, alignment with governmental development priorities and mechanisms. Fourth, ability to trigger people's engagement and integral internal and external collaboration. And fifth option, other than specified. That will be our last polling exercise, and we'll be wrapping up on this. So please, let us try to achieve the same, if not a better participation rate for this one. So Priska, how is it going?
Just 5 responses.
Okay. How many now?
8.
Ending up on this 8.
Yeah.
Okay. Let us know when you have 15 so that we can just have this before being cut off by the automatic interruption of the session. And that will be our final view. Please turn on your cameras. We are taking print screen to have all our participants. So Betty, Pilar, Castillo, Kingun, Camara Sauver, Priscilla. Please turn your camera on. Willem Albert. Priska, what's the status now?
11.
Yeah, let us see how it looks like even with 11.
Okay.
Okay, so we have ability to trigger people's engagement, alignment with government, contents of the capacity building, and duration of the initial support. Great. Can everyone see that? So I think important things to take away. Alignment, of course, everything starts with and within the community. We have to build what will build the foundations. We have to equip people with proper skills. We have to leverage on all the relevant and available partnership in the environment, whatever it is. We have to ensure alignment with the government. And we have to spend enough time because it's not about quick fixes, but a longer term process to really trigger systemic change. I think that will be key takeaways that we can retain for that session. And I'm more than grateful for having been your moderator on this. We are still available through the networking abilities of the platform. So any question you may have for us or for any of our speakers, we'll be more than happy to direct them to them or to answer ourselves. Feel free to ask, and let us consider that it's just the starting point of a journey. Even after the partnership meeting, feel free to contact us in any need you may have, okay? Thank you to everyone. I hope it was insightful and interesting for you. We learned a lot on our side here, and we wish you all the best for the remaining part of the partnership meeting, and let us keep in touch. So bye-bye, everyone. Thank you. Oui, je t'écoute. Ah, Camara, c'est pas à moi que tu parlais. OK.
Yusuf, you wanted us to turn our cameras on.
Yes, all the pictures have already been taken, so it's okay.
Oh,
now.
then I wasn't in. I was trying to. Anyway, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, that's great.
Bye.
1 out of 2. Let's still the one of tomorrow to do also. Okay, so team, let us gather on Teams on the other side and to debrief a little bit. Okay, so bye and see you on the other side.
Thanks, everybody.